Shana Tova. Instead of a Rosh Hashanah sermon this afternoon, what if I told you a story? An amazing story that hints at the mystical. A story of courage, of challenging the impossible, and of second chances. What if I told you a story of faith and the Jewish people? As if that weren't enough, let's take this story into outer space, all the way to the moon. Let's include in this story a launching of our civilization's knowledge into the cosmos, so that one day, eons from now, distant generations might retrieve it. And maybe those distant generations won't even be human. This story will contain technological advances that seem like science fiction and great spiritual lessons that are inspiring not only to our people, but to people around the world. You want to hear it? Okay. Our story begins with your ancestor, Jacob, the son of Isaac and Rebekah, grandson of Abraham and Sarah. Jacob found himself at a crossroads. In front of him lay the world as it was, a looming reality of uncertainty and violence. The forces of his day seemed to demand of him, submit. You can do nothing. The world is as it is. In the dark of the night, when Jacob was most vulnerable, an angel confronted him and they fought. The angel, with the weight of reality behind it, was strong, but so was Jacob. Sometimes things got tough, really tough, and Jacob would be bent in pain. Jacob, your ancestor, found reserves of strength and creativity and kindness and light, which challenged the angel in ways that are still unfolding. To Jacob, that night of struggle seemed like centuries, millennia, until finally, still locked in combat, the morning light began to crest the distant horizon. "Let me go," said the angel, "for here comes the new day's dawn." "I won't let you go," said Jacob, "unless you bless me first." And so the angel gifted Jacob a blessing that still echoes from that moment until today. No longer will Jacob be your name, but Yisrael. Ki sarita im Elohim, ve'im anoshim v'tochal, for you have struggled with divine forces and with mankind, and you have overcome. In that moment, everything changed. Jacob became Yisrael, which means God wrestler, one who challenges the self-imposed limits of humanity. This, my friends, is our origin story. For this blessing was passed down to Israel's children, and then to their children, and to every Jew who ever lived, including we who are here today. Jacob's blessing of God wrestler is in our spiritual DNA. But look what I've done. Such chutzpah to summarize 4,000 years in a breath. Like Jacob's long night of struggle, our history had times of severe pain and had times of incredible hope. Back and forth, through seasons and continents, lands and lifetimes, we have struggled with freedom over oppression, justice over chaos, kindness over strength, and knowledge over apathy. There were years when we held on to these Jewish ideals like a shipwrecked man to a floating plank. And there were years when we could shine our Jewish values onto the world as Or Goyim, a light unto the nations. On Jacob's new name and the blessing that it carried, the ancient Jewish kingdom called itself Israel. And over thousands of years, it too rose and fell, rose and fell. Our people scattered to the corners of the earth. Overwhelmingly, exile from the land was a harsh place to be. We Jews were forced to depend on the fickle whims of local lords. And most of these places, only the wind utters the names of the countless multitudes that we call Kiddush Hashem. Jews killed because, and only because, they were Jews. Again, the forces of the day seem to say to us, submit. You can do nothing. The world is as it is. But we refused. We struggled. We resisted. One form of resistance that we Jews have always wielded is prayer. In the hidden chambers of our collective soul, we pray to God for things to change, and we pray for strength so that we each might do our part to change them. For 2,000 years of exile, we Jews would pray 3 times a day to return to the land of our ancestors where we could live in safety, with freedom, and in peace. In this land, Jews would once again find their feet beneath them on our own sovereign soil. Another form of Jewish resistance was through education, teaching our boys and our girls not just how to read, but how to think. Not just how to answer, but how to question. In every land that we lived, the Jew was known for ingenuity, being resourceful, and for our love of Torah Lishma, higher study for its own sake. Who could have predicted or orchestrated all of the ingredients to make modern-day Israel the quintessential start-up nation? Jacob's challenge to reality status quo, countless Jewish prayers seeking improvement and change, Herzl's chutzpah, our youth's indomitable spirit, and the collective drive of Jewish immigrants from across the earth. Add to this the Jewish culture's obsession with education and zeal for breaking boundaries of what is possible. It was in modern Israel where biblical prophets echo against Tel Aviv think tanks, that the call was heard. Like a herald of old trumpeting a challenge throughout the lands, in 2009, Google put forth a quest. The prize was $30 million to any private team that could send an unmanned spacecraft to the moon. Engineers would have to build, launch, and safely land the spaceship. Now, only 3 programs had ever done this before, all of them superpower nations at tremendous expense. The Soviet Union, China, and America. Scientists predicted that this challenge would propel humankind into a new era of space exploration by drastically reducing the cost and pushing the boundary of new technologies. Quickly, the would-be champions began to gather, with 24 well-funded companies from across the globe, all seeking the fame and the Lunar X Prize. The question was, could it be done? And if so, who would do it first? Jonathan Weintraub wanted to give it a try. At the age of 22, the young man from Israel had spent a year at NASA's Ames Research Center in California. But try as he might, he couldn't find anyone crazy enough to join him. Until one night, he met up with 2 friends at a Tel Aviv bar. Yariv Bash was a computer scientist, and Kafir Damari an entrepreneur. Over drinks, the friends got to talking. So what if they didn't have any real experience? So what that they were competing against private companies who were years ahead of them? So what that it would cost millions just to get started? They had drive, they had faith that they could figure it out, and they had heart. By the end of the evening, the 3 friends were determined, and their nonprofit called Space-IL was born. Their spacecraft was eventually named Bereshit, which is the first word in Torah and means in the beginning. The beginning of a new year. The beginning of an adventure. The beginning of a movement. Space-IL's first office was so bare, so low-tech, that it didn't even have air conditioning. Up 2 flights of dingy stairs, into a room with threadbare carpets and dim lighting, but inside were some of our smartest, most talented, knowledge-hungry youth. One of them, Amit Levin, was only 15 years old when he was recruited out of Tel Aviv University. A physics prodigy from a tiny village, Amit's task was to find a landing spot for Bereshit by analyzing NASA photographs of the moon's surface using an algorithm that he created. Another was Adam Green, one of the old men of the team at 24 years old. With a master's degree in engineering, Adam's job was to plan the spacecraft's route. He had never launched anything into space. But, as he expressed with a shrug, neither had anyone else in Israel. Over the coming months, Space-IL recruited other space evangelists, over 200 of them. 95% of them were volunteers. None of them had ever worked on a moon mission before. Every aspect of the spacecraft presented a new challenge, especially as Space-IL struggled to keep the craft lightweight and on budget. The Google deadline came and went without a winner, but by this time, Space-IL's mission had taken a life of its own. Before long, sending Bereshit to the moon had become a matter of Jewish and national Israeli pride. Shimon Peres, channeling 4,000 years of Jewish tradition, blessed the endeavor, saying, "I'm proud of the youngsters who created this initiative to put the first Israeli spacecraft on the moon, and I know that they can achieve it." You see, for Israelis and Jews all over, this became more than just going to the moon. It was a reminder to us that big ideas matter. Thinking beyond our self-imposed limits allows us to transcend. It reminds us that we are part of something bigger, that we are part of something grand. Big ideas like this bind us together as a community and show us what we can achieve when we work together, the Jewish people and the human race. It forces us to ask the question, if we really set our collective minds to it, what in the world could we not achieve? To me, one of the best parts of this story was the intention of the three founders. More than to win the prize, they hoped that this project would connect kids in Israel to science and to connect Jewish kids abroad to Israel. We saw this last year when AIPAC invited Yonatan Weintraub to speak at Temple Emanu-El. He spoke to our kids right here in this sanctuary about Space-IL and going to the moon. In all of my years as a rabbi, I've never seen kids so taken with anything Israel. It was a lesson for all of us on many levels. Our connection to Israel can be more than reacting to a crisis du jour. We should, together, celebrate Israel's courage, attempts, and successes to bring the world from where it is to where it could be. On February 22nd, 2019, Bereshit launched from Cape Canaveral, hitching a ride share out of Earth's atmosphere on another craft, the SpaceX Falcon 9. Once out of orbit for more than a month, Bereshit was guided by a command center at Yehud, Israel. After 3 loops around the Earth, the entire mission depended on a complicated maneuver to precisely enter Bereshit into an elliptical lunar orbit and then adjust Bereshit's flight pattern into a circular orbit around the moon itself. As it entered the final frontier, the spacecraft took a selfie with Earth and Israel in the background. On the corner of the spacecraft, there's a plaque that reads, "Small country, big dreams." Small country, big dreams. In its final form, Bereshit was light and nimble and incredibly efficient. It weighed only 350 pounds and cost a tiny fraction of what NASA spends on a spacecraft. In addition to its scientific innovations, Bereshit carried a nano library containing over 30 million pages of books, including 17 dictionaries in different languages, encyclopedias, books on art and science, and information about discoveries that have influenced the world. How Jewish is that? The people of the book have created the first library on the moon. But Bereshit also carried with it the greatest pieces of the Jewish civilization, the Torah, memoirs of a Holocaust survivor, Israel's national anthem, stories written by Jewish children, a copy of the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and the Israeli flag. In short, our best attempt to preserve our journey, who we are, and who we one day aspire to be. That time capsule, in its essence, is our collective Jewish prayer. And so we watched with bated breath as Bereshit hurtled its way towards the moon. But in the final moment, the craft's main engine stopped operating. From 250,000 miles away, the system was reset and brought back online, but by that time, it was too late. Bereshit had been falling for too long, and it crashed onto the moon's surface. Clearly, this was unexpected. After having come so far, at the last moment, to fall. It was a fall, but it was not a fail. The Bereshit spirit that signified a beginning will reverberate for ages to come. Hundreds of young men and women who worked at Emanu-El have since started dozens of projects with that experience. A generation of kids now want to explore the bounds of what might be possible, some through science and some through Israel. A second chance mission is already in motion, and the Nano Library is believed to be fully intact. A generation of youth, through the efforts of Emanu-El, have been empowered to be hopeful and curious. They've been taught to lean into the big questions that the human race needs to face. With the resolve of our ancestor Jacob, whose wrestling with the angel is the epitome of hope and the darkest of night, we too can struggle to determine what is possible and what will be our future. On this Rosh Hashanah, may we be worthy of the name Israel, God wrestler, to transcend and to overcome the self-imposed limits which keep us from changing our reality. Like the blast of a rocket, the sound of the shofar lifts up our prayers. Baruch atah Adonai, Shamea kol truat amo Yisrael barachamim. Blessed are you in our lives, Adonai. You hear with love the shofar, true voice of your people, Israel.